The Culture Club versus the Crazy Gang, 1988 FA Cup final, Wembley. This is a story of a group of young men rising to upset the elite. It's a club wombling free, extolling the virtues of the English footballing pyramid to tell anybody that you can achieve anything if you want. This is Wimbledon.
Sanchez was in there, and that's a goal for Wimbledon. And there it is. The Crazy Gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Feels nice to start a history lesson relatively late in the day, but this is a story of Wimbledon, an area of the world more well known for its strawberry munching, Pimm's, swilling tennis championships and its recycling intensive animated wombles. Like most English football clubs, Wimbledon FC was formed in the throes of the Industrial Revolution off the back of local pupils, but they just simply never chose to take the club national. They'd win the Isthmian League on 8 occasions, the Amateur FA Cup in 1963, before finally they joined the Southern League in 1964. Instantly, Wimbledon were promoted to the top flight of the Southern League, behind Hereford United, who would become quite famous with their exploits in the FA Cup soon enough. That's called foreshadowing. Now Wimbledon were theoretically in a position to enter the Football League, and I say theoretically like that because only 3 clubs had gotten elected since the war. Colchester United and Gillingham in an outrageously generous 1950, but that was only because the third divisions were expanding to 24 teams, and then it was Oxford United's turn 11 years later, again only because Accrington Stanley had resigned from the league. In other words, you had to wait for the Football League to reformat or for another club to die to get elected. So despite making a name for themselves as a handy top half outfit in the Southern League, the Football League had effectively become a closed shop. So much so that even in 1968, when Port Vale were expelled, they were quickly re-elected. There was beginning to be a slight sniff of hope in this respect though. In 1970, Cambridge United finished top of the Southern League and replaced Bradford Park Avenue in the Football League for wholly sporting reasons, apparently. The U's finished top of their league, Park Ave finished bottom of theirs. It was almost like this paradise of promotion and relegation existed for one solitary season. 2 years later though, Hereford United were the next club elected to the Football League in exchange for Barrow. Barrow, who finished above Stockport County and Crewe Alexandra, but they were simply not as popular. Whilst their finances were on their arse, they weren't as popular or fashionable, delete as appropriate. Oh, and they didn't do this on television either.
Newcastle. Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal!
So in a popularity contest, the mode of success became obvious down at Plough Lane. Go on a bloody good cup run, enrapture the wider public, and then, only then, would the Football League elect you. So in 1974, Alan Batsford took charge of Wimbledon, less than a year removed from defeating Brian Clough in the Cup 4-0. He'd also had the recent experience of taking his Walton and Hersham team to FA Amateur Cup glory. The method now was obvious, the man was now in the building, and Wimbledon just waited for a catalyst. September the 14th, 1974, and a little game against the almighty Bracknell Town was what started it all. But then again, making the first round proper of the FA Cup was by now more of the norm than crashing out in qualifying. But still, you could count on one hand the amount of times that Wimbledon had then won that first round fixture. Recently, once they got to the second stage, they'd either been understandably dispatched by a team from Bristol City or Rovers, or gallingly beaten by teams of a lower level in Bath City or Folkestone Town. This time they washed Bath out, as you should always do, before being handed Kettering Town, a fellow non-league team. No matter their momentum of eliminating Swansea, Wimbledon's was greater. This, in the midst of a 24-game unbeaten run, finally the time to break Wimbledon into the third round. The Cup promised a big name and it delivered in spades. Burnley, Turf Moor and Wimbledon weren't about to disappoint, winning 1-0 to become the first non-league team in absolute donkeys to slay a top-flight side. Then the fourth round draw took things up another notch.
To save a penalty by Deadshot, Peter Lorimer. Peter Lorimer, the man that could kill Wimbledon after a brave fight. Here he goes. He saved it. Clark near, Mackenzie between the two. Giles. Oh, he got a deflection.
Like Leonardo DiCaprio washing up on a beach, the idea was incepted in the Football League's minds. Wimbledon were a big deal. Then they went and proved that in a league concept by winning the Southern League not just once but 3 times on the bounce. The first came 3 points ahead of Nuneaton Borough before the Dons became a little bit more undeniable. 8 points from Yeovil in 1976 as Cup heroics were thwarted in the second round at home to Brentford, and that became 5 points ahead of Minehead in 77. This time though, they would get into the third round of the Cup. Admittedly, it wasn't as glamorous as a replay with Leeds United, but another replay with another top-flight club in Middlesbrough not only pumped money into the old coffers, but was the final nail in the coffin. Now, Wimbledon were a Football League side. With that, Batsford handed the club over. In the hot seat now was Dario Grady. Despite the club having to adapt to being professional and keeping those purse strings tight, 13th place in the 4th division ahead of names like Scunthorpe United, Crewe Alexandra and Limati, Halifax Town was a massive achievement. In the following campaign, Alan Cork was the hero of the cup, grabbing the winner in a replay against Gravesend and Northfleet before prolonging the second round tie against Bournemouth. While Southampton would prove too much in the third round at Plough Lane, it was Cork's goals that helped Wimbledon into third place and up into the third tier at only the second time of asking. Sadly though, they have to say that it was a promotion that came way too early as Wimbledon finished rock bottom of the third tier in the 1979-80 campaign, this in spite of John Leslie's goals. No, not that one. Making his debut in the January of 1980, however, a club legend signed for Two Monkeys, Dave Besant, and he would prove as agile in goal as Two Monkeys back in the 4th division when Wimbledon gained promotion in 4th spot. But that wasn't the story of 1980-81 as a trip to Oldham resulted in the Dons scraping into the 4th round of the FA Cup for only the second time. Waiting for them there, Wrexham and the Racecourse Ground. Albeit a second-tier team, Wrexham were definitely a more beatable opponent than their last 4th round foes. Sadly, the Welsh side overcame the Dons. It says a lot that this was described as a missed opportunity. The yo-yo years continued wildly through the new management of Dave Bassett as the club were promptly relegated from the 3rd tier again, although putting in much more of a fight in 21st place. But they'd be back instantly, promoted as champions of the 4th tier in 83, in the first year since their introduction to the Football League that they failed to win a cup game.
Midfield, combines sweetly with Stuart Evans, then finishes in style despite Hodges' attempt to clear off the line.
That's his cross, it's awkward! Oh, it's gone in!
This time things were different. Bassett's free-flowing and direct football brought to life in a much more successful stab at the 3rd tier. Whilst promotion clearly has to be the centrepiece of the campaign, a League Cup elimination of Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest ran it a very close second. Nonetheless, the Dons wouldn't eclipse their 4th round record in the competition just yet, disappointingly bowing out away at the almighty Rotherham United in November. Whilst proving they belonged in the 2nd tier, finishing in a magnificent mid-table position, Bassett once again had the chance to have a go at Brian Clough when the 4th round of the FA Cup came along. After a replay, Wimbledon won out, gaining access to the 5th round of the Cup at the 3rd time of asking.
Boot tactic. Downs booted and Stuart Evans glanced in the equaliser.
But that proved to be a step too far for the Dons, but they had taken a comfortable top-tier side all the way, only bowing out after a replay. Had they won, they would have been drawn at Old Trafford. Trips to places like that, however, wouldn't be so far away, as the incoming 85-86 campaign proved. Yes, that's the old tennis-loving Wimbledon gaining promotion to the top tier of English football in only their 9th season in the Football League. Alan Cork, who had been there right from the very beginning, top scored with 15 as an obdurate Wimbledon confirmed top-flight football. After adding the trio of Laurie Sanchez, Andy Fawn and Dennis Weiss to an already combative side ahead of their first stint in the 2nd tier, John Fashanu was acquired ahead of the eventual promotion campaign. With the spine of a tough-to-beat and direct team in place, the case study of Watford walking down a similar path and being highly competitive in the top division, there wasn't anything to say that Wimbledon couldn't do the same.
National Glyn Hodges. A well-placed shot and joy for Wimbledon fans and players. Time, John Fashanu headed his first goal in the 1st division to restore the Dons' lead. His taken penalty put the match beyond the Villa's reach, although Graham Turner's men did pull one back.
If the opening day defeat up at Main Road was supposed to be this big baptism of fire, Wimbledon simply shrugged that off and won the next 4 league games, all by a single goal against Villa, Leicester, Charlton and the aforementioned Watford. I don't care that the season was only 5 games old, this graphic needs to be made to show just how far Wimbledon had come. They were at the very top of English football. Whilst of course, yeah, that wasn't allowed to last, and sure, they unexpectedly bounced out of the League Cup to Cambridge United at the first hurdle, Wimbledon weren't to be deterred. After winless streaks of 6 and 3 before Christmas, where the cynics salivated on each occasion though, Wimbledon simply returned back up the table, unable to be killed. Whether that was a headline-grabbing triumph at White Hart Lane or successive wins against the almighty Manchester United and Chelsea, Wimbledon proved they weren't here to make up the numbers. They'd signed Vinnie Jones because if names like Sanchez, Wise and Fashanu weren't combative enough, have another member of what was being called the Crazy Gang.
Match captured by the club's own video. Wimbledon won 1-0. The scorer, Vinnie Jones.
In it comes, Fashanu goes up and gets it, and that's number 1 for Wimbledon. Promptly followed up with this goal, coming in 10 minutes. Up for him, and the shot, and that's number 2 for Wimbledon. At which point Chelsea were reduced to 10 players, and Wimbledon struck for their 3rd goal of the afternoon. And that's number 3 for Wimbledon. Corner comes in, and that is number 4 this time for Wimbledon.
This was a Wimbledon side who entered 87 off the back of a win at Upton Park and in the safe confines of 11th place. Only the top 4 of Arsenal, Everton, Liverpool and Forest had won more games than the Dons at the turn of the year. It was a giant leap forward in league competition, as Wimbledon lost just 3 games after a New Year's Day trip to Highbury. They'd finally learned how to draw games, adding wins over Newcastle and Watford with the completion of doubles over Man United and Chelsea. But comfortably, the biggest achievement was going to Anfield and getting a win. Unthinkable when they were scrapping with Minehead at the top of the Southern League a decade ago. And it didn't even tick off the other barriers broken down by Wimbledon. Enter the FA Cup.
Good position for Adrian Heath. The goalkeeper's had it. Wilkinson's in the middle. It's a goal for Everton. He's got Sayer in the middle. Stevens to beat, and Stevens brings him down. Penalty. And he went that way. Save. And it's got in. Yes. It's Sayer. Good stop. Fashanu for Wimbledon. It's a goal. Fashanu. Sayer. Sayer. Yes, it's there. It's 3-1, and surely they've done it now. Brother looking to get to the byline. And he scores.
Wimbledon had never gotten further in the competition, finally reaching the quarter-finals via the means of the eventual English champions, Everton. Sadly, they could not repeat their heroics against Spurs from earlier on in the season, as they fell to an underdog victory at Wembley in the final. That's Coventry, and there's your second dose of foreshadowing. Team that was 6th place in the league, and it was somewhere even greater than Dreamland, if such a theoretical place could be designed. But you know, they would go one better. Not that it felt that way in the summer of 87 as news broke that Dave Bassett was leaving Wimbledon. After being such a key figure of the club, there was the chance that the whole arse could fall out from under it. Now he was gone. Tactically, it made sense that Bassett would exchange one direct football W for another, filling the void at Vicarage Road left behind by Graham Taylor. For Wimbledon, though, they would be introduced to former Coventry, Arsenal and West Ham player Bobby Gould. Holidaying in Corfu, Gould took the call that would change his life. He was plucked from managing third-tier Bristol Rovers. He said, "If it hadn't been a top-flight club, I wouldn't have gone." But the club was top-flight, only in name admittedly. Their training ground was still at non-league level, what with its manager's office adjoined to the back of a cafe. Gould would be faced with the departures of Kevin Gage and Nigel Winterburn, state of your hair lads, with Terry Phelan, John Scales, Eric Young and Clive Goodyear all coming into the backline for a combined $250,000. Bargain. Meanwhile, the new manager had to source an entirely new backroom staff, and he began from the top and worked his way down. Hiring Don Howe as his assistant and Terry Burton looking after the youth system, both were inspired choices.
John Fashanu putting them ahead in the 8th minute, with the aid of a rebound off Thomas. And a minute later, with the Newcastle defence still stunned, Alan Cork made it 2-0.
Now Goodyear played in there. All pushed away. Fashanu! Cannon now looking to get his cross in. Does so. Gibson with a header!
It seemed fitting that they should be reunited with Dave Bassett so quickly, and despite losing another opening day fixture, they quickly picked their heads up, holding the champions Everton to a draw before finding a groove via wins at Derby and Newcastle and at home to Charlton. Wimbledon were going to be just fine. Whilst experienced League Cup team and recent winners of the competition Oxford United had their number in the fourth round, Wimbledon continued to bloody the noses of the elite in the league. They spooked Spurs at White Hart Lane once again, this time on Halloween, before holding Liverpool at home on Bonfire Night's Eve and taking maximum points off Manchester United. After sinking Arsenal in the final game of 87, Wimbledon was sat in 7th, level on points with the reigning champions of Everton. If anything, the Dons had got even better.
Nichols' cross found Aldridge. Beardsley's cross, Johnston's knockdown, Barnes' goal 11 minutes from time. Enthusiasm may have turned to temporary anxiety as Young scored a late goal for Wimbledon.
Wimbledon had added Terry Gibson to the front line, another $250,000, obviously a club record and one that was valued as much as their entire new backline. But it was a club that was noticeably picking up the booking, so much so that Bobby Gould took to his programme notes to complain. 40 yellow cards had been acquired by the time 88 rocked up, a small number today, but in a time where you had to maim somebody to just get a warning, indiscipline was creeping into the club. As Ron Atkinson's West Bromwich Albion turned up to Plough Lane for the return of the Cup, Wimbledon needed to keep their heads.
And it's in, and it's off the head of little Terry Gibson. Wise. And it's in. Round the back came Brian Gale. Oh, it's a cruel bounce for Jackson. Fashioneau!
Patience was a virtue at home to Albion as they soon pulled away from their Black Country opponents. The same applied at Mansfield Town in the fourth round before a trip to Newcastle spun the entire run on a dime. In a match billed as Jones versus Gascoigne, Wimbledon won out in their most spectacular cup display yet. It meant Watford in the quarter-finals, another reunion with Bassett. There would be no finer time to make their biggest splash yet in the Cup. Alongside Newcastle, both Everton and Man United had fallen at the fifth round, and with Manchester City and Liverpool, as well as Arsenal and Nottingham Forest being paired together, there was a clear route now to Wembley.
Down goes Gale, and there's no foul given. Allen busy in the middle, and Allen scores! A chapter of accidents for Wimbledon. Young has equalised, and Fashioneau is away. 2-1, and with 10 men, Wimbledon are cutting Watford apart.
Another barrier had been broken down. The never-before-seen semi-finals of the Cup were on the horizon, and not only that, they'd avoided the big fish of Liverpool and Forest. Luton Town were the opponents at White Hart Lane. The league naturally had become a foregone conclusion. Whilst Wimbledon would win just 2 of their remaining 11 after the quarter-final victory, they lost only 2, maintaining a stable position of 7th come the end of the campaign. But after White Hart Lane, the end of that campaign didn't just end with a final league match.
Martin with the flick, Harford! Form further over. Young coming in, so is Fashioneau, and Dibble drops it. And the penalty, get 1-1. And he takes it. Goal. Oh yes, it's Little Wise.
Yes, that's Wimbledon sinking Luton Town in the semi-final of the FA Cup. Luton, it should be noted from the off, weren't mugs and in 3 weeks' time would have their own Wembley coronation by upsetting Arsenal in the League Cup final. Luton, who hadn't lost to Wimbledon yet, had now lost to them twice in a month. For Dons, something bigger. Liverpool, FA Cup final, still the showpiece of the footballing calendar in England, even more so amid the years of the Heysel ban. The crazy gang, the culture club, as John Motson so eloquently put it. As one of the 3 subs allowed on that day, a certain Laurie Cunningham, who was keen to end his career in England, whilst not in his West Brom or Real Madrid pomp, a level of experience and calmness that was much needed in the capital on the afternoon known as May the 14th, 1988. There was even talk of negotiations that could take Wimbledon into a new frontier entirely to Europe, no matter if they won or lost the final.
Sanchez was in there, and that's a goal for Wimbledon. There is Aldridge, Beardsley, well he might score here. Hamilton. Good year on Aldridge. Wimbledon protest to go the same way as in the semi-final. He did, and he saved it, and made history.
For more incredible football stories from the 1980s, click on this playlist right here.